Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest holds a degree in engineering physics with a minor in nuclear engineering, but found her passion in entrepreneurship and helping connect people to a more meaningful life. She is a graduate of the United States Military Academy, a former Army Captain and Apache helicopter pilot. She is the founder of the Tribal app and believes in the power of strategic storytelling to connect people to more meaningful relationships and to resources for hope, help, and purpose. Welcome to the show, Rachael Jackson.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Like I said, when we were kind of chatting before the show came on, I was inspired by your badass bio. I was like, holy smokes, this woman's not to be messed with. So I really like what you're working on. You have a really incredible background. So why don't we just start there? Talk a little bit about your background and then how you transitioned into what you're working on today.
Yeah, well, I feel pretty lucky to have my story. I guess back in high school when I was 18 years old, if I had my way with it, wouldn't have turned out that way because my mom actually called the Army recruiter and enlisted me out of high school. So I enlisted and I found I made a friend in the Army who was applying to West Point, and I got a command referral, went to the prep school and kind of snuck in the back door of West Point. So I'm very grateful that my mom called the Army recruiter. But that's where I found my stride, I guess. I really enjoyed and thrived in the military. And so in West Point, did a lot for me, taught me a lot about leadership, about discipline and respect and honor, integrity, and a lot of other values. So I'm very grateful for that story. I forgot what else you asked me. So,
Well, just any part of your bio.
Any part of my bio. Well, I mean, you said physics, engineering physics, and you're right. I do have a degree in that, and but I haven't done anything with that except for maybe applied physics in flying a helicopter. So that was probably the highlight of some of my stories, was being an Apache pilot. Also very grateful for that opportunity. Flew with a lot of amazing pilots who've done some amazing work, and I'm very honored to be a part of that. But that, time seems like a long time ago, and it's not really, it's part of my story, and part of the reason why we've been a little bit successful with Tribal app is because of that warrior mentality and some of those connections. But it's what I'm really excited about right now is what we're building with Tribal.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because after the military, then you moved on and you were the founder and CEO of Community Journal, right?
Yeah, actually, so my mom ended up passing away in 2010, and at that time I had been medically discharged from the Army and had gone through kind of a period of depression on my own. I was really planning on a career in the military, and kind of had my identity solely built up in being a pilot and an officer. And so when I was medically discharged, I went through this really very difficult time. And I'm a Christian, and I believe in the Lord, and he really walked me through a very difficult time and started to show me who he was. And I got to know him because he was there in my kind of dark days, I would say. I started to kind of move forward, and got a job in Huntsville, Alabama, and worked for the government. And then was kind of on my fast track to government security when, like I said, my mom passed away. And at that point in time, I actually went through kind of a crisis in my faith, because people would say, oh, she's in a better place. And I was like, really? Because that seems so far-fetched. Like I said, my degree is in physics, and my dad he's not a believer. He's an atheist, and he had always challenged me to have a reason for my faith. And so for about 3 months after my mom passed away, I was struggling to believe. And all I could say is, God, help me believe. And what he did was he's walked me through my story and how he had been with me and had been answering so many of my prayers and walked me through, and I had gotten to know him. And at the end of 3 months, I said, okay, I believe in God because I've experienced him. He's changed my life. And so, what do you want me to do? And he said he wanted me to do something to reach people who are going through very difficult times, and who need to be connected to hope, help, and purpose. And he said that the way to do it was going to be through stories and relationships. And I know that sounds weird to some people. God doesn't talk audibly a lot of times. And I didn't hear it audibly, but that was just the impression in my heart, was that somehow I was going to connect people to hope, help, and purpose through stories and relationships. And so that was 10 years ago. And ever since then, I've been working to figure out what that looked like.
Wow. And so is that the tribal app and essentially how that's manifested?
It is now the tribal app. So what started was I started a blog, and I realized that there's 600 blogs or 600 million blogs with a new one created every half second, and nobody cared what I had to say. So that wasn't going to reach millions. So I ended up starting an online magazine, and reached out to people I knew at my church who had amazing stories and testimonies of hope. And they shared their stories, and we weren't preachy, and we weren't trying to proselytize or anything. We're just sharing our stories. And so in 2012, we raised $7,000 in a Kickstarter campaign to take that magazine that was online and make it a print magazine, because that's where I was business-wise back then. I didn't even have a smartphone. So I was like, print sounds like a good idea. So we printed our first issue of Shattered magazine, and that got picked up by Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, but turned down by some Christian publishing houses. And so I felt very validated that we were headed in the right direction, and we were trying to find a way to connect with anybody who needed hope, help, and purpose. And so about 5 years ago, I realized that we needed to do something digitally. And that's where Tribal started to evolve. So, yeah.
Excellent. And so with the Tribal app, like on the website, it talks about experience tribal for impact, for business, for purpose, or not for military. And so how does the app, and like, what are your views on leadership, and like, how do you use the app, or your just thoughts in general on those kinds of topics? Like, what are you trying to teach?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think leaders, strong leaders who care about their people, leaders who are trying to make an impact in the world and help people do great things and live meaningful lives, whatever that means to you. But I think leaders are sorely needed in our communities, in our country, in our world. And the problem is that leaders are literally at war, I believe, for the hearts and minds of their people. I think that we are fighting constantly a barrage of messages and a barrage of noise that would have people think that they're isolated, alone, and that leads to more division than it does to bringing us together and into the kinds of relationships that can make positive change. So when you have 1 billion websites and 600 million blogs, like I said, 3.6 billion social media users, 6 million apps on the App Store, right? And then you've got the average person sees like over 5,000 ads a day. You got like less than 3 seconds to convince somebody to click on your post or your content to deem it worthy. You have used to take 7 times in marketing for product price placement and position in front of your target market, and now it's upwards of 20 times. If you're not saying it 20 times, it's not getting heard. It's just, there's such a need to cut through the noise and connect people to what matters again.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And when we started this conversation, we talked a little bit about the polarity we're seeing in the world, how, we have all of these different things happening. There's all of these different movements, all these different beliefs, and people are really fighting each other. And so what do you suggest or think about, how do we have a polarizing view but remain civil, remain yeah, I guess civil? Because actually even one of my clients, she works on like peace missions, you know, at very high levels of, one of them was, well, I can't really talk about it, but just really, I was like, wait, I was like, oh, I can't talk about that. But really crazy stuff. You know what I mean?
Okay, I have a secret clearance. You can talk to
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you would. And so cause you've been in high conflict situations, you've seen these things before, but what about on a level of like human to human? Because I've experienced that myself, of just people really upset for an opposing view. And it's like, can we let somebody else have another view that might even be completely opposite to our belief, but not hate them or take action in that kind of way?
Well, I think we have a real need to build empathy for each other. And that's why I really believe in the power of storytelling. I honestly think that we hate each other a lot less than probably the world would have us believe. You know, when the dominating messages across media and social networks, you know, basically what happens is that with social networks, it's just this experiment of let humanity publish anything it wants, and then let human nature dictate what rises to the top based on algorithms and what you like and click and all that kinds of stuff, you know. And so unfortunately, you know, there's some good things about social networks that have come about, you know, and they're not going anywhere, but there's some bad things that have come about from social networks too. And so what we're working to do is try to figure out how can we bring people back together and reconnect and realize that we don't hate each other, and to maybe just get away from some of that messaging, because the messaging that's dominating is getting paid for by clicks. It's getting paid for, you know, like that's what's going to keep on getting pushed, you know. And so if we can walk down the street and say, you know, I wonder what their story is, instead of judging people based on how they look, act, or whatever, you know, if we can get to the point of empathy, we find that we have a lot more in common with each other than we ever knew, you know. And stories have a way of crossing all demographic barriers. And that's why I really believe that stories are this powerful on-ramp to more meaningful relationships and the kinds of resources that we need to change our lives, to change our families' lives, and to change our communities' lives.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I actually recently wrote an article just on expanding our compassion. When we were chatting a bit before, I was telling you that I was just curious why we still had war and starvation and famine. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that, you know, if we see ourselves as a global community and we look for, you know, like, our similarities are much different than, you know, whatever things we might have on the surface, whether it's a belief, whether it's the way we look, you know, but we seem to be focusing in and zeroing on those things. And you're right about the social media world right now, because even in advertising, it's the big companies, you know, pharmaceuticals, things like that, you know, things that might not be for your own benefit, have the money to advertise. And in Buddhism, they talk about mental nutriments, and it's essentially what hypnosis is. It's just like, if you're always seeing a certain image or a certain word or a certain idea, that's going to start to get implanted in the mind. And people aren't very cognizant of what they're taking in. And we really need to be cognizant of what we're taking in, because it's going to affect how we operate in the world, how we see other people. One of the examples I gave before was people just watching TV and thinking it has no effect on them. Well, you know, it's not just CSI, like one show. You have genres of just murder shows. So if you go to work and then all you do is watch murder shows about murder, you're going to be way more sketched out about the people walking down the road,
Yeah.
because that's all you're looking at all the time, right? And so it's going to affect your brain.
I had to stop watching Law and Order SVU because I was like, I'm just depressed all the time.
Yeah, it absolutely matters. And so, you know, what I'd love for you to speak about is what do you recommend people do to get to a little bit more meaning and purpose? And a secondary add-on question would be a little bit about leadership, because growing up a martial artist, that's where I was taught, leadership and respect, for self, respect for other people, and kind of translated. And I'm definitely not the perfect student, but I at least got accustomed to some of those ideals, because if we can connect to something that's meaningful by our standards and purposeful, it's always of benefit to other people. Always, 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 it's of service to other people. And so that's when we need that discipline and that work ethic and that regimen to actually go make it happen. It's not just going to be gifted to you. We do need to work for it.
Right. So I'm writing notes because that was a long question, but I want to address it because it's important. So you asked, what do you recommend to get people to a greater level of meaning and purpose? And I would say that honestly, and it's not just based on this, okay, but as I was diving into kind of my studies on what we were trying to solve, the big problem that we needed to solve, I came across some shocking results around the world, and that is like, in Britain, they did a study where they found that 3 out of 4, or no, I got that wrong. 90% of Brits ages 16 to 29 find life to be meaningless. Meaningless. They have suicide parties are cultural phenomenons now. They instituted a minister of loneliness in Britain. In America, we have 3 out of 4 Americans who say that they're lonely. You have, I think it's something like 26% of millennials say they have 0 friends. What we have right now going on is a loneliness epidemic. And even though we are more and more connected and we feel like we're connected, all over the world, we are missing out on quality, meaningful relationships with the people around us. And the National Institute of Health did a study back in 2007 where they found that the number 1 source of meaning is relationships. It's meaningful relationships. So even before you think that meaning would come from something like a personal endeavor, some kind of community involvement, your faith or religion, your work, the people have like all this sort of sense of where does meaning come from. That's all good stuff. But if you don't have the relationships to empower that, then it's meaningless, and it leads to a void. And that's honestly, I believe in my faith that Jesus wants us to have a relationship with him first. Absent of that, religion has killed more people in the history of the world, this pursuit of religion. So to me, we need to reconnect people in relationships, and the power of story to do that is what will help connect people back to that and to a greater sense of purpose. And how do leaders figure into it? Well, I'm a big believer in servant leadership. I'm also a big believer in figuring out how to inspire people to move to action rather than to demand that people move to action. And so through strategic storytelling, I think that we can start to open up people's eyes to the fact that there's hope for them in their stories, that there are resources for them that can help them move to where they want to be, and that there is a purpose for your story, no matter what it is, that your story can be used for good and can be used for good in you as well. So what I would really love to see is leaders who know that pouring into their people, that helping their people, that serving their people, that those kinds of leaders are the ones who are going to be those that inspire the greatness in people. But we have to get rid of this need to be right and to just make everybody believe like us. If you really want to move people to action, inspire people to action, meet them where they are, love them where they are, accept them where they are, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have whatever kind of story you have, but let's figure out how to move forward, how to move out of your story and into impacting other people's stories for good.
Well, when you're talking about the storytelling and connection, it made me think about training or studying with some of the Native American elders I was lucky to learn from. And one of them in particular, David Lombard, always talked about how you're not going to do anything by yourself. You need a community to do anything. And that was very much the Native American value and culture. And another piece there. They have strong community, and they also have respect for their elders. They have respect for the land and all these different things that I feel like in our world now with social media and the way things work, we're super disconnected. The kids aren't connected to their parents, and they're living in these fake virtual worlds, and we really don't have connection. And loneliness is a pandemic for sure. Suicide's a pandemic for sure. And especially with the coronavirus, suicides have gone up, domestic abuse has gone up. And so building community is so important. And when I research what's going on in the world, it's been depressing the last few months because I've seen a lot of really negative information. That's like, this is not good. And I always try to figure out what the solution is. And the solution is opting out of something that is not of benefit of other people, accepting people for who they are, for what they believe, for every single thing. Just let them do whatever they want to do. And oppression, because this is where it feels like a lot of oppression is happening, because there seems to be a movement towards forced action. And I think that's where things get a little bit sketchy, for lack of a better word, when we want to impose our view on someone else because we believe it. And, whether it's, and right now masks is a big topic. And, I was like, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. And there's, you look at the data or whatever, there's really compelling evidence that says you shouldn't wear masks. Some people say you really should wear a mask, and says I'm fine with that. But when we start to then impose it on other people, and there's all these other things behind the scene, it starts to get a little bit sketchy for me. And so what brings me hope is knowing that when we see the way we don't want things, when we see the world as we don't want it, and you say, wow, I don't want to be suppressed, I don't want to be oppressed, I don't want to be living this way, I want to create something better with other people who are at least like-minded, they're empathetic, they're compassionate, they have similar values, and they want to build something new. All we need is that participation. We need to just move towards that and participate for building something better. And so my question to you is, when we see all of this craziness going on in the world, how do you think we move towards solutions? What solutions do you see available right now to move us and transform, whether it's on a local level, like a community where people might be able to work together and create something, or on a more global or country level? Because it looks like America is really the hot spot right now, and all the world is kind of viewing it. And I'm not going to get into political stuff because I've been more political in the last 2 months of my whole life, because it's just going that way. And like our Prime Minister Trudeau and all the stuff he's connected to, and like funding the Chinese government. I've been to China. It's communist. It's not good. I don't want that. You can't have Facebook and YouTube, man. That's crazy. And the censorship, we're experiencing censorship that we've never experienced at this level before. And that's frightening. People have a right to have their view. And even if I don't agree with it, just you get the right to say it. And so I'm just curious what you might think is going on, and how could we come up with solutions, whether it's on a community level with who I'm around, or on a global level like my country, Canada, or even Canada globally, America's, the whole thing. Because it looks like a lot of craziness is going on.
Yeah, it does look like a lot of craziness is going on when you pay attention to that. But what you pay attention to will breed what actually happens in the future. So if you think about it, if we collectively as a whole just stopped giving credence to what's divisive, and we stopped paying attention, and we stopped clicking links, I know that that likely won't happen, and it definitely won't happen overnight, because it's human nature. And people who are really good at media have figured out how to get you to click. So, that's, but it would be great if we could all just figure out how to collectively not click, and how to turn around and focus on what's good, what needs to be fixed, and how do we come together. And I do think it needs to be on a hyper local community basis. How do we come together and strategically assess what needs to change in our own community and how we're going to change it, measure the success of those efforts, and then adapt and overcome if we need to tweak things. But I think that there needs to be some strategic changes to a lot of things, including how nonprofits do business, and how we fund nonprofits, and how we measure success in our communities, and how we set the goals that we want to achieve. But I also believe that there's a lot of really good things happening. There's a lot of really good movements towards solutions. And so if we can figure out how to come together and work together and achieve the network effects for good, then that would be awesome. And I don't want to impose anybody's views. I mean, there's some things that we should hold with closed fists. Okay. And that is truths. All men are created equal. The pursuit, for America, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and just there's some things that we should hold in our hands as truths. And then there's some things that we should hold with an open hand and just let other people have their stories. And there's just no need to make them think like me, and as I interact with and love people, my hope is that maybe somebody would ask why I have hope or why I have whatever it is because of my story, if I'm willing to share my stories. And maybe they would be able to find some hope, help, and purpose in their own story as well.
I love that. I think that's a great analogy because I've been going through this and it's been challenging, and you're right. If you stay down the rabbit hole, it's really not that positive. How you talked about the importance of staying informed. So I want to ask you that, staying informed. And I really like your analogy of, one fist closed, one open, because I feel like there are truths that are like really hardcore true, that we all know. And I was having a debate with my friend or something. He's like, yeah, well, how do you know that's true? He's like, well, that's your truth. I was like, well, some truth is truth. Like if I look at you right now and I punch you as hard as I can in the face, I guarantee you're going to feel that. You know what I mean? That is true. And so
we live in a world with fixed laws.
Yeah, physicists will know. And, we have these other ones like, even faith, right? Because we talked about that a little bit earlier. Like I grew up a Christian. It's not my current belief system. I have I like ascended masters. I read Buddhism. I studied with Buddhist monks. I studied a lot of different religions. And it's interesting when you look at a lot of the stories, I find they're very similar. Right. And I find that some people, I went to the Parliament of World Religions with my Native American friend, and there's a Catholic church on every Native American reserve. Do I think that's right? Hell no, I don't. I think they did a lot of bad things. They didn't let them exist as their own thing. They're doing it in Africa right now. And if that's what your belief is, you can have at it as long as you're not harming other people. Now I'm going to bring this up because I'm curious about it. What I've seen recently is a lot of stuff, because I studied human trafficking, is moving into pedophilia and normalizing pedophilia. And that for me is a closed fist.
That's a closed fist.
Yeah. And so we've got now and I posted about this, people get upset, but the LGBT community, if you want to do that, all the power to you. I don't personally care. You can do that. Now you're going to bring pedophilia, which they're trying to piggyback on. And I've seen legislation change, judges changes going and try to lower the age to like children. I have a daughter. This is a very closed fist. And I feel like, in this world, when we see, I think it's that idea of, right, which fist is closed and which one is open. And I feel like we need to know which ones those are. And if we're protecting ourselves in our own view, and as long as someone's not coming, I feel like in martial arts, it's about protection, right? You protect your home. The Second Amendment. I was telling you at the beginning, I was anti-Second Amendment and guns. And now I'm looking at what's going on. I was like, well, the gun could just tell them to go away. It's a protecting over government, overstepping your bounds, don't impose. If you look in China, I've been to China, no Facebook, no YouTube. When I was talking to the translators there, because they had translators as training with Shaolin monks, they were literally, I could see their body physiology change in fear if we talked about religion or politics, because I just studied Buddhism with Tibetan monks and I thought Buddhism was the same. It's not the same. They say it's the same religion, the same word. It's two different philosophies, not even close. In Tibet, it was all about love and compassion, and they were really amazing people and amazing educators when we had these deep discussions. And then China was a totally different thing. And so it's a little bit of a random feedback for you, but I'm curious. The question is, if you want to add in on that, on how do we have the balance of this stay informed versus be educated? Because when I look at history, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, study propaganda, look at what's going on in the coronavirus. A lot of it makes me frightened. And I want to be educated. Like, how did, World War II happen and they do propaganda so good people did evil stuff? How did that happen? Well, there's different manipulation techniques that make good people do bad things. And I don't want to repeat that. I want to move towards solutions, like just living in a world that made sense, where we respected each other, right? And we honored other people's views and beliefs. And we look to just create a better world together and just let all the stuff that doesn't matter not matter.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we live in the most peaceful time of human history. So it doesn't seem like it, because we're bombarded with all the stories and the minutiae of humanity. And humans are, in my belief system, simple. I mean, that's human nature. We tend to gravitate, towards bad things sometimes, and it could be as simple as lying. That's not as huge as an issue as human trafficking, but I'm just saying, like, it's on a scale, this sliding scale. And so you do have to define your truth. And I define my truth based on the principles of Jesus, and that, we need to love others and we need to love him. And that's how I choose to live my life. And loving others does not look like letting human trafficking happen, or buying into that, or buying into the porn industry to support that, or whatever it is, so, but I may or may not be called to fight that fight, right? Because I believe that our stories are actually probably where we should find our purpose in our fight. Because when you have been through something and you've built some level of credibility, you have some level of empathy for people going through that, then I think that's where you should fight your fight and find your truth, find the truth that you want to see propagated. And if you've survived sexual abuse and you want to help others, then that should be your fight. And if you have come out of sex trafficking and you want to help others, then that should be your fight. And everybody can have their own fight. And then if we all work together and figure that out, then we will make the world even better. I mean, we don't focus on the good stuff that's happened, though. Like, I think world hunger went down like 19%. 2 years ago, I think I read a study on that. And that's huge. That is huge. Why don't we gather around that momentum, figure out what's going on, and pile onto that and work and make that, go down even more. I think there's been a whole lot of progress in setting up in entrepreneurship in third world countries. And, let's find what's working and pay attention to that and make that explode, instead of focusing on all this stuff that's going wrong. But I do agree with you that we need to be educated. You need to know history. I wouldn't go into the rabbit holes of all the conspiracy theories, because those conspiracy theories, unless it's your job to root it out, like, they're going to happen. There's powers at work that we don't have the authority to deal with. And I equate it to going to the gun range in the military. So when you go qualify shooting your weapons, right? Let's say you go with a 9mm and your maximum effective range is 50 meters. Okay. And they tell you to step up to the line and stay within your left and right limits and shoot down your targets. Okay. So my target's 50 meters. Maybe it's closer, but I'm not going to be more effective outside of 50 meters, and then you go to the range with an M16. And you have a maximum effective range of 300 meters point and 500 meters area. Still, you go, they tell you to watch your left and right limits, and you got to shoot down your targets wherever they pop up. Okay, then as you get better, maybe more training, maybe more responsibility and levels of authority, then they give you an Apache. An Apache has no left and right limits, and its maximum effective range is 8 kilometers on its own, and or if you're going to lay as a target for the Air Force much further. So that's, you know, what I try to equate that to is that as we focus on our thing, our fight, maybe we earn the responsibility and the rights and privileges to take on bigger fights if that's where we need to be. But we definitely need to be educated and informed, but not hopeless and despairing, because there's a lot of good going on.
Well, that was good to hear, and I appreciate it, because it's something that I consider often is how to make a meaningful impact. And my aunt has kind of been waking up and learning about all this horrible stuff. And she's like, what do I do? You know, it's like, I had no idea all this horrible stuff was happening, and, you know, trying to process it all. And I said, you know, just being a good person in your life and educating in a compassionate way, right? Because she's kind of a fiery lady. She's very intense. So at first she's just like kind of shouting at people, kind of dealing, getting really intense. And now it's like coming back and being like, just let them believe whatever they believe. And you can share, you know, a little bit of that information too. They might be willing, they might be not, but, you know, just be the embodiment of what you want to do, and making that little impact. Like I was coaching someone today, and I was like, you know, what I look at some of the negative road, which is very negative, and I look at some of the positive potential road, and it can be very positive. All I can really do is make the honorable choice each and every day to the best of my ability. And if I make a mistake, own up to it. I don't know everything, you know, I'm just trying my best. And I feel like that's what really helps us keep on track, is just being honest. If somebody gives us feedback and we really listen, and maybe we did something, you know, that was hurtful, and we just kind of adjust that a little bit, or, you know, we look for the opportunities in our daily life to give back and to contribute. And I really liked, again, one of my Native American teachers, David Loneberry, would say, you know, just do 3 kind acts a day, go out of your way to do it, and don't tell anyone. And I really love that. And you know, he would quote from many books. He would quote from the Bible often. He would quote from other books. And so, you know, he's a spiritual teacher of his tribe, but would look at all these other places and other spots of wisdom. And I think that those principles, they're all great on paper, and how do you live them? You know, like he would say at the Parliament of Religions, he's like, you have good Christians, you have, you know, bad Christians. You know, some of them they're like, it's just like people. He's like, you have good natives, you have bad natives. Like some of them are not, you know, doing you know, maybe virtuous things. So how do we just be that example to the best of our ability, do it through action and not just through the ideology? You know, he'd say, some people's heads they're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. And I kind of give the analogy of like, you know, I'm going to a meditation retreat, and there's a homeless person, right? And he's like, I need help. And I'm like, get out of my way. I'm going to get my meditation on. And so I really like the idea of just finding our thing that we know is our truth, and we just know that, right? It doesn't come from outside of us. It's something that we know and have experienced, and it's something that we can verify has meaning and help. We know if we're actually helping and following that thread. Because if I could push the button to stop human trafficking, if I could push the button to stop starvation and all these other things, I'd definitely push that button. And in the meantime, if I can make the little choices along the way, ideally, I can make bigger ripples in the pond of just creating. And one of the other ideas I like is, you know, give it to the hands of God, you know, whatever that is for you, right? Some people it's Jesus, some people it's the universe. I don't care what language you use for that. But I like nature, you know, give it to the hands of nature. Like I'm going to be in harmony and cooperation with everything. Like, you know, put me where I need to be, and I'll do the best that I can.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I really do. There's been a lot of Christians, a lot of religious people who have caused a lot of harm in the world. And my truth is definitely based on Jesus and not on Christianity, by the definition. But
can you define that? So like, would you mean like a specific Bible? Because I've even had people I've had deep conversations with where they'll go the New Testament versus the Old Testament, or vice versa. They're like, this is the one I used. And when I interviewed Jeffrey Doherty, he said the books are mixed up. He said it's not in a chronological order. If you read it in a chronological order, it makes a lot more sense. And he was a former pastor, and he said, I believe in a lot of the principles. I just believe it in a different way now.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that the Bible is a historical document. I believe that it was inspired by the Holy Spirit. I do believe that, I mean, I think if you try to get to the translations and blah, 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 and all the perfection of it, that you're going to get caught up in the religiosity of it instead of the beautiful message that we were lost. And now, because God loved the world, he sent his son, and his son died for us. And now that he died for us, we believe in him and we have everlasting life, and that life can begin now. Here on earth, a life of fullness and joy. And I think that when people know Jesus, they can't help but be moved to love others, because that is who he is. The Bible says that God is love. And so when you see Christians, and this is a problem, 70% of Americans say they're Christians or self-professed Christians. And yet Barna Group did a study about 5 years ago where they found that only 14% of self-professed Christians were more like Jesus in action and attitude. And I'm like, that's astonishing. And 56% were more like the Pharisees in action and attitude. So we have spent a lot of time on the message of Christianity being something about following a religion and obeying rules, when in fact it's about knowing Jesus as your personal savior and realizing that he is the way, the truth, and the light. And by him, people will come to a saving understanding of what love and what life can truly be about. And so and that's my philosophy. I understand that's not everybody's thought process, but that is my truth. And for me, my fight is to help connect people to a greater sense of meaning, to hope, help, and purpose. And to that end, that's why we're building Tribal, that to be the meaning network. And Tribal is not faith-based, but we are faith-friendly.
I like it. Well, I don't necessarily agree with it verbatim, but I love the connection to like his example, and that's why I like the idea of ascended masters, because I also like Buddha. But I appreciate Buddhism as a religion, more like religion to bind. That's my problem with it, and the religious wars and all of that stuff. That stuff's not okay with me. And I like Buddhism personally the best, because it's the more, when I went to the Parliament of World Religions, this is how I equated it when I observed, because I talked to a lot of different people, a lot of different faiths. It seemed like religion had rules with consequences. So if you did do this, you didn't do it, you get rewards. You do this right, you get a whole bunch of sweet rewards. Some people get virgins, some people get everlasting life, all kinds of great stuff. If you mess it up, then you get this terrible consequence. Burn in hell for all of eternity. That sounds terrifying. And I remember being a kid and going over to my buddy's house, Ian, and I was like, dude, you got to ask God into your life, because you're going to burn in hell forever, and this is terrible. So I don't agree with that personally. And so what I liked about some of the other ones like Buddhism and there's a few others, but just because I know Buddhism a little bit more, it's more like an ideology saying this is our framework and how we operate. And when I look at, the Noble Truths and the, is it the 7 Noble Truths? Not forgetting the 4 Noble Truths and the 7 something. I can't remember now. Geez. But I just like the framework of that. And when I would ask them questions, no matter where I was, and this was a specific monastery, so one school, right? Every section has a little bit of a different teaching and a little bit of different thought, but they always really pondered the question, and they came back to love and compassion. And so for them, it was like living the path of Buddha, like you said, like living the path of Christ. And I read what has it got? I have it over here. What is it called? Hold on, I'm going to go get it.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, I got them. These actually are some of my favorite books. This is The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. And it's a little bit out there. And there's also the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. But Jesus shows up in these books a bunch and just lays like a righteous hammer, and they're so good, they're so good. But in the book, so does Buddha. So I'm just like, holy smokes. And so I definitely resonate with the masters and how they lived, and they live by example, because I feel like doing martial arts, like with looking at Bruce Lee for an example or something, we could all go through Bruce Lee's teachings, but if there's 100 people there, maybe 100 people took a different idea from that, and they take that truth and they express it in a certain way, they distort it. And so if we can get as close as we can to the fundamentals of what matters, what's important, and how do we do that in action and embody those principles that are cooperative, I think that's the goal. So I don't know what you think about all that rant.
No, I mean, that's, so you're right. Religion is all about rewards and consequences. And that's what a lot of people put Christianity into. And that's what a lot of Christians think it is too. Well, self-professed Christians think it is too, you know. But, and so that leads a lot of people to struggle with this concept of like reconciling a good and loving God with a world that is very broken and hurtful, and people go through very hard things. And so, you know, when you see, I mean, I've seen amazing men and women of God die or go through hard things. I mean, you see, missionaries get murdered or whatever it is, then everybody's response is, well, where's your God now? You know, like, you're supposed to follow him. Aren't you supposed to be rewarded? Well, the crazy thing is that Jesus said that if you follow me, you will be persecuted. And yet he promises this everlasting life that starts now. And so to me, it's this wonderful story of how even in the hard times, God can use those stories for our good, his glory, and the saving of many people. And this idea that religion or knowing him is not about rewards and consequences, that no matter what, if we profess our belief in him, that we are saved, therefore everything we do comes out of a love for him. It should be driven by love, not because of fear of going to hell or wanting to earn an extra jewel in my crown, you know, when I'm in heaven or whatever it is, you know, like it's a weird thing, because as humans, we believe in fair, and, you know, like, well, this just isn't right. You should reward this behavior and punish this behavior. And so it's hard to reconcile that. But the beautiful thing is if you live the life that the Lord is calling you to, and you know him, in my belief system, you know him and you pursue him. He says, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if you do that, if you pursue that, then we will pursue a wonderful world where, you know, people are loved, I guess, and they feel loved. And that is important.
I agree. I think that's very important. There, you know, I think some of the details, they might be different. I'll just ask it directly. So what if you're with me and we're in Nepal with the Buddhist monks and they have a different belief? Is it, if you believe in the Lord, is it cool that they believe something else and they still live with compassion? Is that okay? Or does it have to be like, it's got to be Jesus? Because they don't believe in, they believe he existed, but they're just like, you know, you can believe whatever you want, but this is our path. It's a little bit different.
It's not my job to change hearts or convert people. I'm cool with whatever. Not whatever. But my job is to love others and to love God. That's my job. So it's not my job to proselytize. It's not my job to make people believe the way I want them to believe. I share my story, and I let God do the work. If that's something that's going to happen, then it'll happen. I don't need to engineer it or make it happen. And I don't need to be stressed out about it either. So that allows me to enjoy life with a lot of different types of people. And I have a lot of different friends with a lot of different beliefs, and it's not my responsibility. You know, as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
All right. Fair enough. Be the example. Believe what you want. You know, we could be friends. I don't believe the exact same thing, but I'd be cool with hanging out with you. You probably have some awesome stories.
Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting though, because, and I think that's important, is because religion and something polarizing, right? Like something very polarizing can really keep people apart, you know? And so it's like, hey, like you could even literally believe something that's, you know, to a point, right? Because there's a hard fist. And again, for me, like there's so much pedophilia stuff going on. That's a hard fist. We are not cool. You know what I mean? we are not cool. But
I'm with you.
yeah, you know,
I'm-
so, but, you know, for other stuff, it's like, you know, we can have a different belief. I have friends that are really hardcore Christians. I have friends that are Buddhists. I have friends that are atheists. I have a lot of friends, spiritual hippie friends. And, you know, some of them on like the scale, it's interesting to see like the example. So some of them on the hippie side, they'd be like universal in spirit and meditation, and it all sounds good on paper. And then sometimes the application of those lessons of all these different spiritual teachings, the application when it comes down to it is not the greatest example, let's say. And so, you know, when you're just observing it, I think all that we can do is just do the best we can with where we are. And then I like what you said is like, hey, you know, I'd be happy hanging out with you. We might have differences, but we could also discuss them. Right?
yeah.
We could discuss them and say, why is it, you know, I would, you know, we could do another podcast on some time or chat, but it'd be like, I like asking why is that the way you believe? How does it help you? And I feel like that's a really big thing we need to switch here is we need to seek understanding. And so even when I went to the Parliament of World Religions, this is what I said too. And this is why I'm not particularly religious. If I take my daughter there, I use the example, it's like 200 and there's 220 religions there. And it's like, go pick the right one. To me, that feels absurd. You know what I mean? I was like, how are you going to pick the right one? There's 220 just in this building. Everybody is there. And I like what my Native American friend, he said, you don't need a broker to God. You know what I mean? You are connected to God in that own way. That's my belief. Everybody can connect to God in their own heart, in their own way. They might find it through Christianity. They might find it through Buddhism. They might find it through nature. There's a book called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, or is it something else? It's I think it's something else. Oh, blanking on it. But basically one of the books, it says there's 4 ways to know God. One of them is internal, go meditation, like type of deal. One of them is study. One of them is nature. And I forget what the other one is, but those 3. And so like if you spend all your time in nature, you can kind of really connect to spirit. And that's kind of how I view it. So, you know, it's just, I think there can be different philosophies for knowing God and just allowing other people their space. And like I said, this is the point of my rant. I tried to seek the understanding of how they made that connection in hopes that I learn something and not judge them for thinking something differently or believing something differently.
Yeah, and you started out by saying that the application falls short of various people's belief systems, and I would say that that's true about Christians too. You know, it's a lot of all of us. You know, and that's one of the beautiful things about the Bible and Jesus is that, you know, we all fall short. The Bible says we all fall short of the glory of God, and so this idea of grace and mercy is so beautiful. And when you talk about just the divisiveness between all of us right now, I think we need to figure out how to have more grace. Let people have their stories. Just like grace, seriously. And I'm gonna mess up, and so I would like grace too, you know. And then mercy for others. I mean, forgiveness. You know, like it's compassion. It's empathy, you know. And honestly, if we could get to the place where we loved others so much that we were literally unoffendable, you know, it just didn't offend me what you're believing, because I want to know your story. I want to know what took you there. Why do you feel that way? What's, you know, like I want to be a resource where maybe there's some kind of good that can come from knowing me and being in a relationship with me, or other people who also want to see more grace and mercy and love in the world.
Well, you know, actually it's funny because you're sharing this, and I'm reminded of a very deep conversation I had with a friend of mine. His wife is very religious, grew up in a very religious family, and she's Christian. And we had a really deep chat about it. And so I was asking her questions, and she was actually giving me responses I didn't expect. And so I said, oh, and so I was like, well, I was thinking, I was like, I don't believe that, but I keep going down the line to try to figure out what she thought, right, and what she believed. And when we got down to it, she really believed in God and the universal principle. And she said, give it over to God. Right. So I prayed and I gave my, you know, life over to God, and, you know, the pursuit of all the values, all the good things that the Bible has in it, like all the good stuff, and had a serious faith. And she created a lot of success. She was absolutely a wonderful example, an absolute wonderful human being. Will give you the shirt off her back. She's amazing. and is the example. And to me, when I zoned in on, oh, this is her core operating system, she was so congruent with that, with living those principles. And she is, when you know her, and experienced great success. And so at the end of it, what I finally got to, I said, hey, I was like, do you know, I know other people who've done what you've done, applying those same principles. The only difference was it was Jesus. It was just a different person. It was a different thing. I was like, same principles, different idea. It kind of, that surprised her a little bit, but you know, it just showed an example to me, because those all the fundamental virtues, all the way that she acts, the way that she shows up, who she is, all amazing. And because of that, in the life has received rewards, has been able to manifest in that certain way and stays congruent with that. And so I think that at the root, and that's what I like. I look at a lot of them. For me, like, this is a spirituality podcast, so I've had a lot of discussions on different views. But when we uncover those basic principles and we can actually apply them, I think we're going to experience those results, and it could be a really beautiful thing, especially if we could just start having compassion for one another and not, stoning them for believing something. Because even some people have a belief from age 20 to 30, and then 30 to 40, and then 40 to 50, and 50 to 60. And we're not all going to be the same here. We're a lot of unique individuals.
Well, hopefully we grow, and hopefully we figure out how to let people grow and to mess up. And, it's different. We're always under a magnifying glass right now, and the world, honestly, like, the world seems to reward, at least some parts of the world seem to reward authenticity, kindness and all that kind of stuff. And that's a good thing. Like, we should, as a world system.
Yeah, that's a truth. I think, some of them are just be truth. Like, kindness is good. Like, what's the vote on that? You know what I mean? Compassion.
Honesty,
compassion. You know what I mean? Is like,
so that's good. I'm good at landing there. The thing is can we try to make that the dominant message? Mm-hmm. And just kind of refocus people and say, look, there's a lot of people who've messed up over the years. A lot of people, and some of them are in public, some of them aren't. We all have opportunities as humans to grow and to become better versions of ourselves the next day. And that is what life should be about, is to figure out how to grow, how to do better. I love, and this is not from the Bible, this is from Anne of Green Gables, it's talking about how Anne of Green Gables, she had a teacher tell her that, tomorrow is a new day with no mistakes in it yet, and so if we could just keep moving forward and realize that there's always hope and there's always purpose, there's some kind of purpose out there for you. And no matter how crappy your life has been, how things have happened to you or what you've done, like, there's always an opportunity to become better and to try to improve.
I love that. Well, I know we went a little bit over time. You got some things to do, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate sharing this perspective and going back and forth. We believe slightly different things, and we don't want to hurt each other. Isn't that amazing?
It's wonderful. It's like a shining example.
It's absolutely unbelievable. I remembered. Have you ever heard about Jesus in the Essenes? You ever heard about that?
I have not. Is this Asceans?
Essenes. It's interesting, but that's where there's the 4 ways to know God. And it kind of like talks about, a collective of people that knew he was coming and all kinds. It's interesting stuff. And we discussed this before our podcast. I go down all the rabbit holes. And that's why, I
remember how I said I don't go down rabbit holes.
I go down all of them. I'm stuck in there. I have you to pull me out in the helicopter. He's like, Matt's lost in one again. Let's help him out. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything that you want to share or leave the listeners with, and make sure they can check out the app and your work and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I guess I should promote our app. So
yes.
We're opening up. Tribal is normally done for organizations, for its leader led, basically, but we are, because of the times that we're in right now, opening up a tribal for all. So anybody can come and find some stories of hope, help, and purpose, and maybe share their stories of hope, help, and purpose. So if you go to tribalapp.com, and I believe that the page is to click on is Experience Tribal, and that will give you the invite to our public beta for our Tribal for All.
Awesome. And if people want to find more about you and your work, do they go to Tribal? Do you have a separate thing, or just Tribal?
Tribalapp.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn too if you want to. Rachael Jackson with an A, Rachael.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for your work. Thanks for being the example. And it was lovely conversing with you and discussing all these topics. I feel like a lot of the points are really important. And what I've learned, at least in this little section, is we're not all going to believe the same thing. It's absurd to think so. Your closest friend, your mother, your father, your sister, your daughter, as we go through life, we're going to have different perceptions. We can only have that one perception. And if we can allow space and compassion and acceptance would be amazing.
I mean, you don't even have to accept it as right. Just give them the space to be them.
If we could do that and make a community garden, is this like community gardens good? We have food, water, shelter. Everybody doesn't kill each other. We're good with that. Okay.
Oh, that good. Okay.
Let's start there. Well, nice chatting with you. Thanks for coming on the show. And I guess we'll stay in touch.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt. Yeah. Anytime.
Okay. My pleasure. See you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace. Thanks.